that was the setting. And as I'm in this absolute terror and horror of what had happened, light came to me. I felt light, it felt as if light came and surrounded me and was comforting me. And then it felt like I was rising above the accident scene. And I'll admit I was a little confused, like, what's going on? Hello there. My name is Jeffrey Olsen. And gosh, I want to talk about something that happened to me almost 30 years ago. It's been a lot of time. It took a decade before I could talk about it. And perhaps as I share, you'll understand why. And yet, enough time has passed now that I can share my near death experience and the accident that caused it, and hopefully hold my composure together. It's still emotional for me, although it's been many years. The uh, the details and the spiritual things feel like it was yesterday. Um, in 1997, I was on a little family road trip. We put the whole family in the car. We lived in the northern part of Utah, and we were going to southern Utah to see the Red Rocks and to see my wife's family. And it was actually Easter weekend. So we, went down and spent Friday and Saturday visiting family. We had Easter on Sunday with all the family traditions. And Monday morning came, and it was time for us to pack up and go. Of course, grandma made breakfast. Nobody was going to leave the house hungry. And so she made breakfast, and we did that. And then eventually I got the luggage loaded in. I got the kids all buckled in, and we were ready to head home. And we were just pulling away from the curb. And I'll always remember this. We were just pulling away from the curb, and my wife, Tamara, said, "Stop, wait." And I thought she had forgotten something in the house. I thought she might say, "Oh, my handbag's in the kitchen," or whatever. But she said, "I just want to go say goodbye to mom and dad one more time." And, she's looking at me in this earnest way. I mean, stop, wait. I stopped the car, and she's like, "I just want to go say goodbye." Now, in that moment, I thought, we got to get on the road. We said goodbye. We already hugged everyone. But as she jumped out of the car, and went up and met her mom and dad that were on the porch, waving the way grandma and grandpa do. Um, I noticed as she not only hugged them both, but she kissed them both. And I noticed that. And she came, joyfully jumping back in the car, buckled up, and I took the car out onto the interstate, cranked up the cruise control to 75, and away we went for it was about a 4.5, 5 hour road trip back home. And I had a moment as well. And I'm sharing these things for a specific reason. We're racing up the road. I'm going 75 miles an hour. And I just happened to look in the rearview mirror just to check traffic, to see, just glance. It was a moment, just glanced in my rearview mirror. And as I did so, what caught my eye was Griffin, my youngest son, and he was asleep in his car seat. And he had been our miracle boy. We didn't know if we were going to have more children. And there he was. And I noticed details. He's there sleeping so peacefully. I noticed how long his eyelashes were, just in a glance in the rearview mirror. And I thought, what a beautiful boy. And then I heard my oldest son having he was playing with action figures in the seat behind me, having this fantastic lightsaber battle. And so, I'm seeing my youngest son and thinking, wow, what gratitude for him being in the world, and hearing my oldest son play. And, the car was filled with the noise of a little boy. And then I glanced over at my wife, who had also reclined her seat back, and she was sound asleep, but she was still holding onto my hand. And I had this absolute moment of gratitude, like, wow, we're 10 years into our marriage. We're chasing our careers. We've got these two little boys. And she's still holding on to my hand. It was just, I was so thankful. And, my attention went back to the road and you know, we're headed home. I'll always remember that moment, however, because it was about an hour or so after that things got really difficult. There was reports of crosswinds. There was reports of a red pickup truck that was driving erratically on the interstate. To my best recall, and this is one of the hardest parts of this story, I believe I dozed off. I think I just nodded off at the wheel. And when I did so, um, I swerved to the right, I overcorrected to the left, and I lost control of the car. And the car began to roll not off the road, but down the road at 75 miles an hour. It was a horrific automobile accident. And I blacked out for most of the crash. But when the car came to a stop, I was completely conscious. And the first thing I heard was my oldest son, Spencer, only 7 years old at the time, crying hysterically in the back seat. And what I felt is, man, I've got to get to my boy. I've got to get to my son. But that's when I realized I couldn't move. I was pinned. I was disoriented. I just recently found out I was actually pinned under the car. I've reconnected with some folks that were the first on the scene. And to their recollection, the car was on the driver's side, sitting, upright like that, not on the wheels. And I was actually pinned under the car on the driver's side. And I remember in the accident being aware of what was going on, but it was the rancid smell of gasoline, all the broken glass. I couldn't move. And I was actually unaware of my injuries. What happened is both legs were crushed. My left leg was eventually amputated above the knee. My back had been damaged. A couple vertebrae had been cracked or broken, but it didn't damage the spinal column, ironically. My rib cage was damaged. My lungs were collapsing. My right arm had almost nearly been torn off. And then the seatbelt or the car, whatever, had torn my whole midsection open and ruptured all my intestines. I was a mess physically. And emotionally, I was so distraught. But all I knew is that my oldest son was crying and I had to get to them. But the brutal reality hit then that no one else was crying. And I saw and knew and was aware that both my wife, Tamara, and my youngest son, Griffin, that they had passed. They were killed instantly in the accident. And that's about the darkest place I think a person could ever be in. I mean, here I am pinned. I'm losing consciousness. I've got a hysterical 7-year-old that I can't get to. Half the family has passed, and I was driving the car. I mean, the guilt, the regret. I kept thinking, can't I get those 3 seconds back? And it was an absolute panic. I mean, the horror, the terror of the whole thing. And I don't share that to be graphic. That was the setting. And as I'm in this absolute terror and horror of what had happened, light came to me. I felt light, like it felt as if light came and surrounded me and was comforting me. And then it felt like I was rising above the accident scene. And I'll admit I was a little confused, like, what's going on? Man, now I can breathe. There's no pain. I'm okay. How could I possibly be okay? What is this comforting light? And then as I'm in this light, it felt like a bubble, like a holding tank. Tamara, my wife, who I knew was deceased at the scene, she's there in the light with me, but she's very much alive. Beautiful. She wasn't displaying any injuries. And she began to communicate. She was saying, Jeff, you can't stay. You've got to go. You've got to go. You can't stay here. And she was emphatic that I couldn't stay. And we actually had a conversation. If I stayed with her, Spencer, our 7-year-old, would be orphaned. And for whatever reason, she couldn't come back, but I could. And I mean, it almost felt physical, but it was beyond physical. Like I felt her hands on me. She would like push my chest and say, "You've got to go." Then she would grab me and pull me tight, and we embraced. We were crying. It was emotional, and we had the conversation and made the choice that I would come back. And that's probably the most profound goodbye I'll ever say. And then, boy, our thoughts are so powerful. Like as soon as I made the decision, I'm going back. As soon as I had that conscious thought, I'm going back. Then, whoosh, it felt like I had no sense of time or travel. Just boom. Suddenly, I find myself moving about a very busy level 1 trauma center. Now, I really don't have a concept of time while in that light. I mean, I later found out people arrived at the scene, some of which I have now gained contact with, and they've become dear friends. Um, Spencer, my 7-year-old, was banged up pretty good, but he basically walked away from the accident. I had to be extricated from the car or taken out from under it and life flighted or airlifted to the nearest level 1 trauma center. I didn't know any of that. I only knew that I had crashed the car, that half the family had passed. And here I was moving about this busy emergency medical center, having had the conversation with Tamara, my wife who had passed, but she was very much alive, and I had chosen to come back. And as I moved through the hospital, it was profound. Like everyone I saw, I mean, the doctors, the nurses, the families of the other patients, the patients. I mean, it's like I had 360-degree awareness of everything, and a connection to it. I now call it the oneness. I was in the oneness, and everyone I saw, it's like I knew them. I felt them. I knew their love. I knew their hate. I knew their motivations, their challenges. I knew everything about them. And yet I saw them in such magnificence. And I've used a few examples. I often talk, there was like a nurse that passed by me and unaware of me, but I was so aware of her. I mean, wow, it's like I knew her life. I even was aware of and felt as if I had experienced it even as my own, the abuse she had received as a child. And yet in that same instant, it's like, wow, look at her. She's here serving, healing, helping in a hospital. And I was aware of other things. It's like I knew everything about everyone, but there was no judgment. I saw them in this profound magnificence. And in my words, it's like, wow, I'm seeing them as the divine sees them. I'm seeing them through a higher perspective, through the eyes of God, if you will. And I loved them. I mean, I didn't know them; they were strangers, but I knew everything about them, and I saw their profound spiritual divinity, if you will. It changed me forever. And as I had that experience, I finally came upon a body or a man laying on the gurney that I didn't feel anything from, which I thought was odd. And that's when I stepped closer to look and realized, goodness, that's me. That's not me. I'm having this profound connected experience, but there's my body. There's the skin suit I wore, and it was so broken. I mean, there was this profound sadness thinking, wow, it's so messed up. And also this profound reverence. It's like, and I took it for granted. I never realized what a magnificent machine the body is. I know I don't have to remind my heart to beat, or I saw the body as this profound, magnificent, sacred house, tabernacle, place that my spirit was having the experience in this life with. And yet I knew I had to get back in it. it was busted up, but I had to connect back with the body. And again, our thoughts are so powerful. As soon as I made the choice, I'm going in, I'm connecting with the body, then boom, I was back in the body. But back to all the grief and the trauma and the pain and the regret and the guilt of the accident and what had happened. And it was so heavy. The hospital was a oh, it was a wonderful and horrible experience. I was ventilated. They had a big tube down my throat doing all the breathing for my lungs. My legs were immobile. My right arm was immobile because the way the shoulder had all been torn out. And they eventually tied down my left hand because I kept grabbing at all the medical equipment. And gosh, I felt like I was in and out of the body a lot during that early time in ICU. And I would experience things like I was aware of other patients and their families. That was it was a stabbing or a shooting incident, and I was aware of the family. I could feel the grief and the panic and the worry of the family, and yet I was in a hospital room all by myself. So, it was a strange and interesting experience. And granted, by that time, I had a lot of morphine and who knows, but it's worth pointing out at the scene of the accident when I had the initial experience, there had been no narcotics involved. I was in the hospital for almost 6 months. I mean, I had 18 surgeries in all, putting me back together. So much of that is documented and discussed in my personal memoir, Knowing, the book Knowing. And it was a long haul. I mean, wow, I learned the value of family and friends. I mean, my brothers were there by my side and practically lost their jobs, to come and sit with me. And the guys at work would come in. And there's one interesting aspect of the accident, and this is when they first started letting people in to see me. A man and a woman came in, and I thought maybe they were a couple. They didn't demonstrate themselves as a couple, but they came in regular clothes, and I was confused. I'm like, I don't know who they are. I can't place these people. They're not from my work. They're not from my neighborhood. And then they chimed up. The woman spoke first, and she said, "We are part of your original trauma team, and we wanted to come see you." And I thought, wow, that's kind, I mean, and the doctor said, yes, I was the attending physician when they life flighted you in. And wow, I thought, this is so great. It was small talk. The nurse said, we didn't think you were going to make it. You seem to be doing really well. We're so glad. And then she sat down by the bed by me, and she actually got emotional. She started to cry, and she said, we need to tell you why we've come to see you. And this was weeks and maybe even months after the accident. And she said, we had an experience in the operating room while everyone was working on you. And she said, your wife's spirit was in the operating room. And she was very emotional. And I kind of looked over at the doctor, and I just looked at him like, they didn't know me. They didn't know me from Adam, and I didn't know them. And he said, yeah. He said, I actually saw her. Now, he said that she was standing in the air above my gurney and that she communicated with him. And I said, what did she communicate? And he said, well, she simply shared her gratitude for what we were doing to save your life. And I just burst into tears. I'm like, of course she did. That's exactly who she was. And they didn't know I had made this deal. They didn't know I had had a near-death experience at all. And it was the nurse really that felt so inspired. We need to go talk to that guy. In fact, the doc has become a good friend of mine, Dr. Jeff O'Driscoll. He was telling her, no, I'm not going to go tell patients that I see, their deceased loved ones in the operating room. But they did. And he and I became really good friends. And I eventually shared, well, that day I said, I had a profound experience too. And I shared with him some of the things I had experienced. And I mean, it was a big chance. He was a stranger, but I also knew he was a doctor. It's like, if I'm nuts, he'll take me to the psych ward and get me the medications I need if this is a hallucination, or, so I felt safe in talking to him, but I knew it was real. And they were a huge, I didn't need validation, but they certainly validated the fact that while I was having this profound out of body or near death experience, they experienced something profound as well. And that's something that's quite unique. I mean, Dr. Raymond Moody, who was the creator of the near death experience, he's researched it for years and has 3 degrees and 3 PhDs, I believe. But he said, wow, that is something so unique and so profound, because the near death experience can be explained, well, Jeff, your body was traumatized, your brain was losing oxygen, you hallucinated the whole thing. But Dr. Jeff O'Driscoll wasn't injured. He wasn't, his brain wasn't losing oxygen. And both he and the nurse had what they call a shared death experience. I didn't know that till after, but that was a unique part of it. I continued to have profound experiences, and I'll share perhaps the most profound at the end of my hospital stay. And this is when I was off the heavy narcotics. I had gone from ICU to surgical recovery, and then I'd go back into ICU. I was throwing pulmonary emboli, the blood clots that lodge in your lungs. I had horrible infections because of the rupturing of my insides. I was very sick, but by this time, I was actually out of ICU, out of surgical recovery, out of regular hospital. I was in the rehabilitation wing. It was only weeks before I went home. And I was finally able to sleep on my side. My where my torso had been ripped so wide open, they hadn't even been able to close that up for a long time. But now I was able to sleep on my side. And I had laid so long on my back, I had rubbed all the hair off the back of my head. My head was bald on the back of it. But I was at that state where I knew I was getting better. I knew I was going home. And I was able to roll and sleep on my side. And on one particular night, I fell into a deep sleep. And the strange thing is, I was aware that I was sleeping. Like, my consciousness was saying, oh, wow, you're actually sleeping peacefully. And as I did that, that light came again. The same light as the scene of the accident. This light seemed to come and surround me and comfort me. I'd been in such grief. I mean, such pitiful grief, and the death of my wife and youngest son, and this light was like comforting. And again, it felt like I was rising above the hospital bed. But this time the light like went away. It dispersed away, and I was in the most beautiful, beautiful place. I mean, people use words like heaven, the spirit world, the other side. The word that comes closest to what I experienced was I was home. I felt like I was home. I mean, it's like, oh, I'm home. It's so familiar. It's so welcoming. And I was whole. I had both legs. I had both feet. I was so overjoyed, and I began running. Like, I could feel, I mean, it felt like a very physical experience. I was running, and I could feel the energy of the ground beneath my feet. I could feel the intelligence in my thighs and calves and toes. And it was this amazing physical experience. And yet here, apparently, I was out of the body again. And I was so happy to be home and be whole. And then I got the message I wasn't there to stay. And at that point, there was like this corridor pathway. I knew I'm to go this way. And I went down that corridor. And at the end of the corridor, I could see a crib. Now, Griffin, my youngest son, who was only 14 months old at the time of the accident, he had still been sleeping in a crib at the time of the accident. And, he was rambunctious. I mean, gosh, he was starting to climb out of it and, cause mischief. But I had grieved so miserably, and I saw that crib. And so I raced to the crib, and I looked in it, and there was my little boy. He was sleeping as peacefully as when I'd glanced in the rearview mirror on the ride home. And everything came back. Like I noticed how long his eyelashes were, and there was all this love. And I swept him up. I picked him up, and that felt physical too. I mean, there's a heat and a weight when you pick up a sleeping child, and I'm holding my little boy. And I began to weep, thinking, this can't be real, but it was so real. Like I could feel his rib cage expanding. I could feel the heat of his body. I even leaned over and I smelled his hair. And I'm like, it's him. And as I'm holding him and I'm emotional, I feel this presence behind me coming closer and closer behind me. And I'm holding my little boy and I'm just marveling, he's okay. He's okay. How can this be? And the presence came closer and closer until it was standing right behind me. And then the guilt started to bubble up in a horrible way. I'm thinking, my little boy's here because I crashed the car. Um, his life was cut short because I fell asleep or swerved or overcorrected. And the presence was right behind me. And I'm holding my little boy and I'm weeping. And I have all this regret and all this guilt coming up. And I actually had the thought, I hope I can be forgiven. And with that thought, and this almost felt physical too, it's like these divine arms just wrapped around me and held me and my little boy. And then the lid came off. I mean, the lid, there was just this downpour. It felt like it was coming through the top of me, through my whole being. And I'd had that thought, I hope I can be forgiven. And the first communication was, there's nothing to forgive. Everything's in divine order. And I thought, that can't be. I mean, he's here. I crashed the car. I began to see my life. They say your life flashed before your eyes. It didn't flash. I was looking at my life, specific instances, the people in my life, my brothers, my family, the people I'd been kind to, the people I hadn't been kind to. I began to see my life, and I had so much judgment of it. I mean, I was like, well, that was a mistake. I didn't mean to do that. But as I was held in the arms of this divine creator, it's like the only thing I was asked is, what did you learn? What did you learn? And so I was looking at these situations and I would begin in judgment of them, but then it would be like, well, yeah, I learned this and I learned that. And I was seeing the benefit, if you will, or the soul expansion, if you will, to these things in our lives. I even saw things that I thought, well, that was wrong. I knew it was wrong and I did it anyway. And this beautiful being that held me communicated, that's your judgment of it, not ours. We love you. You are as precious and as perfect and as beloved as that little boy you hold. And here I am holding my son. This thing's magnified because I'm holding my child and I'm in the arms of what I call God. And I'm being told, yep, you are that precious and that known and that beloved to us. And I say us, it felt like there was concourses of angels, of divinity, of masculine, feminine. I mean, I felt like the whole universe had gathered to look at my silly little life. And yet I was looking at it so differently in all this love. And then I was given a tutorial on choice. And this was something I couldn't really talk about for a long time. But I did ask the why questions. Why, God? Why both of them? Why'd they have to cut my leg off? Why? And that was always transformed. But what are you learning? What are you becoming? And I was kind of angry and I was hurt. And in this tutorial on choice, I was told that I had a choice. I could be mad at God the rest of my life because this accident was allowed to happen. Or I could beat myself up for the rest of my life because I was driving the car. Or, and this was a third choice, I was told I could exercise my will. And I'm like, my will? It's your will be done. I've been taught that since I was a little boy, And this was profound. What the Creator said to me is, my will is your will. That's how much you're loved. My will is that you have free will. You get to choose. And I was told I could give my little boy back, that I could choose to hand him over and trust, and therefore it wouldn't feel like he was torn away from me. And in all that love and all that peace and all that beauty, I kissed my little boy, and I gave him back. I handed him over to God, and I trusted, and then, back to the hospital bed, and the amputation and the wounds and the braces and the colostomy bag, everything that was wrong with my body. And I was back in this third dimensional realm with all the challenges. I had a little different insight. I also became very worried about my 7-year-old who had survived the accident. And he had been to see me in the hospital, but I knew I was going to be going home soon. And I worried about that. I'm like, how's he going to accept me? I'm in a wheelchair. I've got one leg cut off above the knee. My other leg's in a full-on brace. This arm was all in a brace. All I could do was drive an electric wheelchair with my one good hand. And that's the way I went home. In fact, I didn't even go. I went home to my brother's house. I still had to have home health and physical therapy and all kinds of things going on. And that's where my son had been staying. He had spent time with my brothers, and he was in my younger brother's house with his wife and family, his cousins at this point. And that's how I returned from the hospital. And of course, my brothers came to get me, and they would literally have to pick me up and lift me into the electric wheelchair. I couldn't transfer into it with all the injuries and what was going on. And they did that. And we were going to my younger brother's house, and I was worried all the way, like, how is Spencer, my oldest son, only 7, how's he going to accept this? And when we pulled up in the driveway, I see him come to the window, and he's looking out the window. He's watching as my uncles, as his uncles, my brothers, his uncles are lifting me up and putting me in this wheelchair. And I just thought, how's he going to deal with all this? And he came running out of the house, and he ran toward me, and then he ran right past me. And I thought, oh man, it's too much. I mean, the injuries, all that's going on, it's too much. And I was a little heartbroken, and I continued toward the ramp that my brothers had built so I could drive the wheelchair up the ramp. And when I turned the wheelchair, I just looked to see where he'd gone. And he'd actually run across the street. And he began knocking on all the neighbors' doors, and he started shouting, come out, come out. My dad has made it home. My dad is here. Come see my dad. And I burst into tears. I mean, he eventually made the loop, and he ran, and he threw himself on my lap, which just about killed me because I still had all the, I had all the sutures and everything from the abdominal reconstruction. But there I was holding my son in this realm. And this is why I share that story. I mean, here I am in a wheelchair holding my surviving son, and it was no less profound than being on the other side holding my son who had passed. I mean, heaven was right here. And it was a beautiful experience, and it was challenging. I mean, years have gone by now. He's now grown, and he's married, and I'm a grandfather. He made me a grandfather. And my grandson's about the same age as Griffin, my youngest son, at the time of the accident. These things have all come full circle. But I've learned to really honor the little things. Gosh, if my son's, running up and telling the neighbors I'm home, and he's not nearly as judgmental of me as I am myself, that's a big deal. Or if there's that whisper, just like the day of the accident when Tamara said, wait, stop, I want to go say goodbye to mom and dad. When those whispers come in, pay attention to that. Really honor those things. I don't dismiss suffering. It's easy for me to say, boy, it sure expands the soul. I mean, pain has showed up and teaches me every day that I'm alive, and yet in the greater hands, in the higher perspective, we suffer for a moment and our soul expands. And because there's no death, we get to take all that wisdom with us. We get to take all that wisdom with us, and it even serves us here and now. Perhaps because of the suffering, I can be more kind. I can have deeper compassion. I can have a greater capacity for empathy because I know how that felt. And that's the near-death experience, and my life has transformed and unfolded, and now I'm a gray-haired man, and I still wouldn't say I have it all figured out. I sometimes laugh and say my book's called Knowing, and I don't know if I know anything, but I'm quite comfortable not knowing.